There was no one moment of shakiness to epitomize their relationship. Rather, it was a gradual dissolution of whatever love had been there to begin with. The steadiness of the breakdown had lulled John into a sort of complacency over the state of their marriage, while Layla tried desperately to improve his qualities as a husband, her key to marital bliss. Layla's complaints, as well as the replies, were repeated over and over again. She would say,
"We never spend enough quality time together."
Or,
"I always plan all of our trips and our nights out. Why don't you make the effort?"
Or,
"I think that we should start having more sex. It'll make us feel closer to one another."
John would reply,
"You're right, Lay. We should spend more time together."
Or,
"Why don't we go out tonight? I'll pick the restaurant."
Or,
"Yeah, let's have more sex. I think it'll make us feel closer."
But the resolutions never lasted long, and the complaints were eventually repeated. Layla's commitment came from a romantic notion that all marriages could be saved. During the hardest times, she remembered
their trip to Washington a couple months after they were married. On the last night of their stay, they sat in Colonia Park across the bay from Seattle. The bright lights reflected off the water, illuminating millions of small white wildflowers on the water of them. She never felt so close to anyone.
Layla believed she could revive that feeling. One night, Layla and John were lying in bed. A soft summer breeze ruffled the leaves of the big oak tree outside their open bedroom window. The softly lit apartment was quiet and warm. They both sat in bed looking at a book, neither really reading it. Layla had asked John to take a few days off from work so they could take a little trip together. She reached for the cup of water on her night table to break the discomfort of his unresponsiveness, and her outstretched hand bumped the cup, knocking it to the ground. Water spilled off the table and onto the ground, and tears welled in Layla's eyes as she ripped tissue after tissue from a Kleenex box to dry the puddle on the carpeted floor. Piles of bunched tissue surrounded Layla as she kneeled, dabbing and dabbing at the little mess. By the time it was dry, she was sobbing.
"I can tell by the way that he is moving to give him a wide berth. His eyes roll back and the whites show as he turns, a graceful pirouette, before hitting the pavement hard, his whole body convulsing. Augustine! My friend Augustine! Somebody call an ambulance! Somebody call 911! Hey lady, you're taking too slow! That girl, she's taking too slow!"
Everyone stops and stares where he lies on his face. No one turns him over. No one shakes him to see if he can speak. We listen to his dry, rattling breath.
Augustine, he knows I don't love my wife. He knows.
First to arrive is the fire truck with the 2 policemen.
Have you been drinking, Kenny?
No, we were drinking Orange Crush.
Yeah? What was in that, though?
Excuse me, sir, can you tell me what's the matter?
Policeman snorts and rolls his eyes.
He's drunk, lady. What else? We stand for a full 5 minutes, staring at Augustine flat on his face until the ambulance comes. It isn't until they're lifting him up and trying to turn him over that we see the blood. The plasma so thick, dripping from his head to the concrete. It's a bright sunny day and I'm sweating. They had to cut through 5 layers of his clothing, down the front with small scissors.
Wonder if those were his only clothes.
I want to go with my friend. I want to go with him.
Kenny is pacing now. The police officer barely looks up.
No.
A boy riding a bike stops to look on.
This is my church,
he says.
Oh, thought it was one of my members.
With him eased onto the stretcher, they can secure his neck with yellow boots. Augustine, the saint that wrote philosophy so long ago. The female medic comes and takes his hand.
Augustine, can you hear me? I'm Meg. You had a seizure. We're going to take you to the hospital now. Okay? Everything's going to be okay.
With that, they lift their burden into the truck and slam the door shut. The fire team stays behind to wash away the blood stain with the fire extinguisher.
Female jogger pauses to look for them to spray and continues. She doesn't know what they're cleaning.
To her, it could be anything. Paint, tar, sand.
Augustine. I stayed until the very end. I watched and waited until they tied your head with a sheet and lifted you up and away. I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to collapse on the pavement for someone to take your hand.
Augustine, I'm Meg. Everything's going to be okay.
Peaks of green beans rise and fall along the broken skyline. The sky feels assaulted and pours upon the beans. The peaks of beans grow, defying the grey wrath.
Oh yeah!
The beans are blinded as they face the milky clouds. The sky laughs at their helplessness.
God snaps the green bean shell and mashes each pod between his yellow molars.
Sorry, I'm late. I call as I walk in the door.
No one responds!
I go to the office to print out directions. But then Susan comes in and hisses at me.
Jimmy has a school project, she says, tearing out the printout. Don't take that away from him. He probably understands computers better than you do.
My daughter Ashley says.
One earbud snaking down her neck and the other hanging limp on her chest.
This is the first time she's spoken to me in 3 days.
Jimmy's dominating the room, a chocolate and peanut butter sandwich on his hands and on his face, and sits down at the computer.
Susan beams.
And I cringe. She gives me a dead eye, so I leave the room to go finish packing up the car. "20 minutes into the drive, my back is numb from Jimmy kicking the back of my seat! I follow Jimmy's directions to the letter without protest. The end destination says somewhere in Quebec. We're supposed to be going camping in Yosemite. I expect someone to notice we're headed in the wrong direction before long,
But
they don't. So I keep driving. My back ain't the only thing that's numb. I try to ask Ashley about school.
But she doesn't answer.
I can see her sneering in the rearview mirror. I mentioned something about discipline under my breath.
And Susan muttered something about chauvinist pigs under hers without looking up from her cell phone.
I ask if anyone's hungry.
And Jimmy starts screaming about ice cream! Ice cream!
I
ice
pull
cream!
off the freeway!
When I see a sign for
31 flavors!
just so I can hear myself think again. When we get out of the car, Susan starts patronizing me for
Indulging Jimmy all the time!
The last time I mentioned something about discipline, I was a chauvinist pig, I replied.
She gives me the look. But the look doesn't scare me anymore.
Because she hasn't slept with me in months anyways. I pay for the ice cream
And then go sit on a different bench than the rest of them. They are all texting over their ice cream.
Including Jimmy. Jimmy is 6 years old and now has chocolate swirl all over his face, hands, and cell phone.
I decide to look on the bright side of things. At least my car has brown interior. No one will notice the stains. I consider mentioning something about the directions, but I need another bite of almond fudge instead. I wonder what Quebec is like this time of year.